It is acoustically modified music working in initially the classical music genre, where we take compositions by Mozart, Haydn, Vivaldi, Bach, and other rich composers. We rearrange the music, record the music in very specific ways so that we can work with the acoustic properties of sound to help them be more recognizable and train the brain through helping the brain recognize changes in sound frequency, in volume modulation, in temporal processing or timing components, and in space, because how we perceive sound and respond to sound is based on frequency, volume, time, and space. So we train those characteristics through a very specific listening protocol based on how we modify that music.
Yeah.
So we'll record the music in a certain octave with certain instruments to achieve certain frequency bands. And some of the work that Tomatis did that really laid a foundation for what we do with the listening program is something called really a frequency map, okay, of the human body and the human brain, because clinically he observed that different sound frequencies, when we had a deficit in our ability to process them, materialize behaviorally in certain behaviors that he would observe. And that he theorized that if you could stimulate those sound frequencies and restore them to perception, that therefore you could restore the function or optimize function through this frequency map. So lower frequencies corresponded to motor development, okay, lower brain areas. So first we become physically efficient.
Okay.
So in the listening program, a lot of what we do is we train the low frequencies that correspond to kind of foundational brain functions. Then what happens after we become physically efficient? We develop communication language and the ability to communicate. So we then go in and focus on those speech and language frequencies. Where do we receive and where do we express speech and communicate with each other? And once we begin to dial in that communication, we work on higher order thinking skills. So we begin to work on the higher cognitive functions in the higher frequencies. So in the listening program, we have music recorded to specific frequency bands, acoustically modified to enhance those frequencies, as well as modulate volume, work with spatial components of the sound in terms of where's the sound coming from in relation to your physical body, and then we put that into 15-minute training units, what we call modules. And this was an important element because one of the things we are observing in the work before is, and this will resonate with you, that often the intervention that was designed to prevent or treat something caused it. And this is what's critical. What I began observing is that a lot of kids were going into fight, flight, stress responses when they were undergoing therapy.
Right,
okay?
Because you're digging in the wound.
You're digging in the wound,
okay.
And you're digging too deep, and you're digging too fast, and you're not preparing the child for it. You're not doing anything to help them integrate after you've done your digging.
Right.
Right. So the intensity of the stimulus and the duration of the stimulus is so great that you can put a child into a sensory shutdown. Behaviorally, they would act out, they would shut down, they would go to sleep, they would have avoidance behaviors. And I remember, I was young when I started doing this, and Dad, when I'm doing these therapies, do so many of these kids have to go to the bathroom? He just started laughing, and he said, avoidance behavior, right?
Yep.
I had these little kids who were like, I really got to go, I got to take these headphones off. They had to pee a lot. Well, truth was, they just couldn't handle what was happening.
Well, and didn't have the language to tell you that.
And didn't have the language, so that was a natural way out. So, or they'd scream or whatever happened, and this was a small portion of kids, but some had this reactivity, and it was really a concern to me. So we began to modify the protocols of the methods that we were using to try to prevent that once we understood what was happening, or I understood what was happening. So we built that safeguard into the listening program because this was an important distinction. We weren't doing a clinical method with a clinician working one-on-one with a client. We were developing a method, putting it on compact discs with a handbook, handing it to a parent, and then having a provider consult them as they did it at home, but they're not there hands-on.
Right.
So we had to first make it safe.
Yeah.
Right? So in a lot of the scenarios, okay, if they completely misuse this protocol, what's the worst case example and what can happen? And we did a lot of experimenting to try to see what were the worst possible outcomes behaviorally that would result from misuse. And we really dialed in a very safe protocol that we felt comfortable, even if you did it wildly wrong, you do no harm. So that initial program was 8 CDs with a handbook and a pair of air conduction headphones, and a provider worked with you to do an 8-week protocol, 15 or 30 minutes a day for 8 to 16 weeks. And that was the initial program. Then a researcher said, well, what happens if we double the protocol? Well, we saw very interesting outcomes when the protocols were repeated. And then as practitioners, we train practitioners to do the work as you do at EEG.
Interesting, better results.
Interesting, better results by doubling it, and then modifying the protocol in different unique ways. And we began kind of taking this feedback, saying, well, what if we had this? Or what if we had this? So we began responding to the practitioners and developing new tools. And what's happened is over the years, the listening program was first made available in '99. We're now in 2017. There's been many iterations, and we've moved past that original program, but we are still built on the same principles and foundation of what's there. It's just grown and changed in the right ways.